So I literally thought I was going to get dragged away by kind of dark, shadowy figures, and I'd be sent to the devil. I'd got that picture in my head because of the film Ghost. So I don't know if you remember the film Ghost with Patrick Swayze, and how these demons would drag people away that had done something wrong, or so that's what I said when I rang up, like, the London Lesbian and Gay Switchboard, 1993, December, when I rang them to say I was, I wanted to come out as gay, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't think it was even an option. So yeah, prior to that, the question is, what, when people say, when did you realise you were gay? How old were you? When I was 11, 12 years old, I'd play with friends in the street, or I'd see other people playing in the street, other boys, and I'd never look at them and go, oh, I really fancy you. I'd look at them and go, I wish I was you. I wish I had your looks or your hair. And it was never about it wasn't because he had, like, either nice house or wealthy parents or fancy car. Nothing like that. It was just the looks. And I remember, like, Grange Hill, I used to really fancy Ziggy, who was John Alford, who's since, been in the press for different reasons. But John Alford played, I think it was Ziggy, and I really fancied him now when I look back. And he had longish hair. It went down to about there. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, I wish I had hair like you. And I remember once in school we had to describe ourselves to the teacher. And I remember pinching my hair. I had curly hair then. And if my hair just goes upwards, doesn't go down. But my hair was like just wiry. And I remember pulling it and trying to convince myself it was as long as this guy that I fancied in Grange Hill, and going to the teacher and saying, well, have I got long hair? And then she went, no. So I was like, looking back now, I just wanted... Bear in mind, this is an age when I didn't understand sex and sexuality and attraction and all that. And I think parents often guide, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but they often guide their daughters more on sexuality and your sexual presence because of the wrong message. So obviously youngish girls, or certainly when they get to the teenage years, they get taught, well, think about the signals you send, how you sit and what you wear and what you say and what other people say and stuff. And even now, I don't think boys or young men kind of get that advice as much as girls. And I think they need to, because there's a lot of predatory men out there, well, I suppose you're getting women as well, but certainly as far as youngish lads, like early teens, there is, like, predatory men out there, and I think it's worse now because of being online. But back to my childhood, here comes Rex. He's going to want to join in probably. I remember standing in the school corridor, and there was a class opposite me, and I think they were just 1 year younger. And I remember there's a boy, and he had a Campari jacket. I think it's a skiing jacket that was really common then. And I'd see him in the corridor in this, like, it was black, it was right gaudy jacket, black and bright pink and bright yellow. And I remember seeing him in the corridor queuing to go into his class, and I was queuing to go into my class. And you know what? We must have just stared at each other for, like, I wouldn't say minutes, but I'd say we used to like just look at each other a lot. I never know his name. Really curious. I'd love to see a photo of him now to remind myself. That's right, Rex. Sorry, Rex has been really annoying. Come here, on here. I remember, just thinking to myself, I don't know what it was. I never said to myself, oh, I really fancy him. Don't know. It was natural, my draw to him. Whether he was to me, I don't know, but that was what it was. It was natural. And I also remember there was a song by Katrina and the Waves, which was Sun Street. And in the music video, there was a boy, and I remember fancying him, although I didn't realise I fancied him as such. And it's just a shot of this guy, and I've seen the music video since, and I've had a look at the boy to try and think to myself, why did I find him attractive, or what was I drawn to him? And there was nothing. I don't know why. He was a right scrawny thing, you know, but it was a boy and a girl chatting in the street, laughing, and it was only a really short shot. And I just remember thinking to myself, again, I liked him. And I also fancied, Rex, stop. I also fancied, there was a kind of a drugs advice leaflet, just say no kind of leaflet. It didn't say just say no on the front. It was a leaflet about drugs advice, and it had a photo of a boy on the front of it. And it was in black and white, and he had mousy hair, I'm assuming, and he looks about 14 or 15. And I think and I think he was there, obviously he was there as in, this is an example of a child who's on drugs or taking drugs, because I think it was like advice for parents. And again, I remember looking at that picture of him and really fancying him, to the point that I remember having a wank in the back of my dad's car looking at that picture. Why? Is it because I felt like sorry for him, or he was vulnerable, or I kind of, you know, I wanted to put my arms around him and give him a hug? It's really weird, isn't it? But no, I didn't get the opportunity to do that. I just did what I did. Fast forward to 19 years old at college, doing my degree. First term, I knew then it wasn't if I was gay, it's when I tell people I'm gay. I'd accepted then, that was it. I was going to tell people I'm gay at some point. And it kind of came to the head after the first term being away from college, and I was really aware of it. And I did have an on-off girlfriend, and, you know, who I did mess around as far as, you know, she'd have a boyfriend and then she'd finish with him when I came home from college or my degree. But anyway, I suppose, and I remember being really, really ill with and worrying about it. And I used to work at McDonald's part-time then. I used to work at the one in Carlisle where I was doing my degree, and I also used to work at one in, I ended up working at one in Manchester. And I remember being that sick and that worried about coming to terms with stuff. I remember being sick on the back of a bus on the way to work in a Boots carrier bag. And the Boots carrier bag had perforated holes. So not only was I sick in the bag, on my own, by the way, sick in this bag, but then all the sick was coming out of the holes in the bag, and I remember other people on the bus reacting. That's how, like, stressed I was about it. But that's when I rang Lesbian and Gay Switchboard in London. I don't even know if they're still around. And rang them up, told them the ghost being dragged off, devil story, demons. And obviously it's a ridiculous thing. I'm not even religious, really, so I don't know what religious relationship there would be to that, but I don't know why I thought that. And then it was like, you know, I'm ready for this. So, and I remember really fancying a barman when we went out in a nightclub called Ruby Tuesdays in Carlisle. And I remember he had an ear piercing. And I remember really fancying him because he had this ear piercing. And I told my mate on the way home that I've got something to tell you, that I'm gay. And then he apparently was shocked. He came out later on. I think because I came out before, I think that delayed him a bit. But anyway, I came out as gay, went home, and that was it. I showed him the Village People CD and told him that I fancied the man with the moustache. I don't know if it was the cop. And then I went to Carlisle, had an outreach service for young men on a Wednesday night, a phone number. I rang the phone number in the centre of Carlisle, hoping that it actually might mean I could go in and meet them on the same night. I was just ready for it. And I went along on that same night and rang the number, spoke to a really nice, decent guy. And then I went, and he said, "Oh, pop in if you want." And I went to meet him at the Cumbria health NHS building where they were it's like a townhouse. And I sat with him, and when before I saw him, I knocked on the door, and the door opened, and it was a short, stocky, ginger-haired guy. And I immediately thought, oh, he's quite nice. But I assumed he wasn't gay, he just worked there. And then went down to this meeting room with this guy. I can't remember his name, but it was really nice. I asked him about who was the guy who opened the door, and he went, "Oh, he's such a person. He's part of the gay men's group, the older gay men's group." And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my God, he's gay. He looked so normal. He looked like a man, just like a normal man." And I don't know what I was expecting. Literally, the someone from the Village People to open the door and mince out of it and say, "Come on in, young man." So I met this guy and had a really good chat with him. He told me about how he used to fancy Jason Donovan, and he thought Jason Donovan was going to leave his wife, would go off with him and all this. And then that was it. And at that point, I accepted my sexuality, and of course the world had to know because I was at art college. It was no big deal, and I was away from home, and I felt the whole world had to know that I was gay. And I wasn't noisy. I wasn't annoying about it, but it was like, I'd be saying, I'd tell people, confidently and comfortably that I was gay. The next hurdle, though, and it was quite a soon hurdle, quite a quick hurdle after coming out as gay, was I felt like I had to come out gay again, because once I'd accepted who I was and I was attracted to men, I realised the kind of men I fancied weren't pretty boys. And I remember being in the pub after the young men's group, which I was now going to, and I got off with a Scottish barman who I was infatuated with. And that was my first encounter. And he wore a black leather coat. It looked like Mouse out of Tales of the City. That's the best way I could describe him. That was his look. I thought that one night thing meant we were a couple, but of course we weren't. I didn't quite understand that bit. But anyway, I remember looking at this copy of TV Hits magazine with them all the other younger gay men, and someone asking me, because Take That were on the front cover, and someone said, "Oh, which one of Take That do you fancy?" And I remember looking at the five of them, like posing with the bleached hair and the white teeth, and I just said, "I don't fancy any of them. Maybe I might fancy one of the dads." And I thought, gosh, I'm not really attracted to normal. What's normal? I'm not attracted to people my own age even. I'm attracted to blokes, bears, as I didn't know them, but blokes, just men, bellied, bearded, kind of straight, but not straight men. And that, that did evolve quite quickly. I met someone who was with for a long time. And that person was the exact kind of person, that I was drawn to. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because when you come out, then people, say, "Oh, you know what you get." I remember when I worked at McDonald's and a lady who worked there said, "Oh, it's awful. Oh, it's terrible that you're gay. What a shame. What a loss." She said. I don't know what she meant by that. A loss to womankind. But then, yeah, you almost have to come out again as not fancying like typical gay men. We used to go to Newcastle, and I remember like going into this bar. I think it was called Hot Shots or something. It was a bar and there was a nightclub attached to it. And I remember going into this bar and I met this guy in Newcastle quite soon after the barman. I was on a roll. I was on a mission then. I remember going into this bar and there was two men in this bar, and the Weather Girls, It's Raining Men came on the jukebox. They probably put it on. And these two men did the entire, just at the bar, not on a stage, just at the bar, did the whole routine of It's Raining Men by the Weather Girls. That kind of, girl, we'll get ready for you. All the hand gestures and everything. I remember watching them, probably smiling and all that, but I remember thinking to myself, God, I'm not you. I'm not. They were old, slightly older, but they were very cloney, as you would call. Cloney was like quite slim. Gay men, and I just remember thinking to myself, gosh, I don't connect with you. And that went on a lot, actually. I struggled to connect with a lot of the gay group as such, but as it was, I'd met someone and I was happy with them and it was no big deal. And it's remembering like being gay is like, if that's my life, being gay is that bit of my life. It's not a big deal. And I came out to my dad. My dad was fine. I had no animosity. The only times I've ever had any animosity or anyone's ever said anything negative is twice. Once when I was wearing a Homo Hero t-shirt, a pink t-shirt with Homo Hero on, and it's when we filmed a sing-along video to Lily Allen's Fuck You, which is on my YouTube channel. And we did that, and someone saw me in the street and just went like, "Yeah, boy," or something like that. And then another time, I was working on a kids' TV show, and we had this like bad drag, this outfit that would get male guests on the show to be a ring girl for this thing we had called Gutbusters. It was called the Saturday Show, and then Gutbusters was two kids in big suits had to like throw themselves at each other. They won't allow it in this day and age. And then we'd have this guest on the show would wear this gold sequin dress and high heels and a blonde wig with a round one and a round two, and that was it. We had this outfit, so I took the outfit from the show and brought it to Manchester for Pride weekend and put it on, and I was in a rush to meet my friends, and I kind of upstaged one of my friends who I knew was wanting to get into drag, and I was like in this probably the right mess, but in this outfit. And again, someone shouted something or said something, and I didn't experience anything physical, just someone saying something. And I remember that night I was like sat there on a wall eating chips and curry and fried chicken from Maxwell's to Kebab House, and sat there on the wall just typically as a bloke with my legs open. And then a woman came over to me, and she goes, "If you want to be a lady, can I suggest you shut your legs?" And that's that. Here we are today, many years later. And I'm sure I'd be really curious to hear like the other coming out stories out there, especially if it's like connected with, you know, if a lot of people I'm connected with on here are attracted to older, you know, to blokes, not what is considered typically, I say even typically doesn't even make sense now, but effeminate men or camp or gay looking men, whatever that kind of means. But regardless, I'd love to hear some of your stories about coming out, and who helped you, and what was the tipping point when you thought, yeah, I'm ready for this. So that's that. Hope you've enjoyed my story. Of course, it'd be lovely to connect with you on here, on YouTube. So do connect if you'd like to. And certainly if you can, leave a comment. All right. Bye.